What if I told you that right now, hurtling through the darkness of space at nearly 200,000 kilometers per hour, there's an object the size of a small mountain that could fundamentally change everything we know about our place in the universe? What if I told you that this object, known as 3I Atlas, isn't just another space rock drifting aimlessly through the void, but something far more extraordinary and potentially terrifying than anything we've ever encountered? You're probably lying in bed right now, maybe scrolling through your phone, looking for something to help you drift off to sleep. But I guarantee you, by the time we're done exploring this cosmic mystery together, your mind will be racing with possibilities that will keep you wide awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if we're truly alone in this vast expanse of space. Here's what makes this story absolutely incredible. Scientists around the world have been tracking 3I Atlas since its discovery, and what they've found challenges everything we thought we knew about interstellar visitors. This isn't your typical comet or asteroid that occasionally graces our solar system with its presence. This is something that behaves in ways that make even the most experienced astronomers scratch their heads in bewilderment. But here's where things get really interesting. What if 3I Atlas didn't just happen to wander into our solar system by chance? What if its trajectory, its timing, its very presence here was deliberate? And what if, instead of simply passing by like a cosmic tourist, it decided to stay permanently? Or worse, what if it was on a collision course with Earth? Tonight, we're going to explore one of the most fascinating and terrifying scenarios in modern astronomy. We're going to dive deep into the science behind 3I Atlas, examine the evidence that's keeping researchers awake at night, and explore what would happen if this mysterious visitor decided to pay our planet a very personal visit. I know what you're thinking. Another doomsday scenario, another clickbait story about the end of the world. But this is different. This is based on real observations, real data, and real concerns from some of the most brilliant minds in astrophysics. And by the end of this journey, you'll understand why this particular space object has captured the attention of scientists, governments, and conspiracy theorists alike. So get comfortable, close your eyes if you want, and let me take you on a journey through space and time to explore one of the most intriguing mysteries of our generation. Because whether 3I Atlas is a harbinger of doom or simply a fascinating cosmic anomaly, its story is one that will change how you think about our planet's place in the universe. Let's start with what we actually know about this enigmatic visitor. When 3I Atlas was first detected by astronomers, it appeared to be just another interstellar object, similar to the famous Oumuamua that captivated the world a few years earlier. But as scientists began studying its trajectory and behavior more closely, they realized they were dealing with something unprecedented. The first thing that caught their attention was the sheer size of this object. Initial estimates suggested that 3I Atlas could be anywhere from 10 to 20 kilometers in diameter. To put that in perspective, that's larger than the asteroid that wiped out the dinosaurs 65 million years ago. That asteroid was only about 10 kilometers across, and it completely reshaped life on Earth. So we're potentially looking at something that could be twice that size. But size alone wasn't what made scientists lose sleep. It was the way 3I Atlas moved through space that really got their attention. You see, when objects travel through the solar system, they follow predictable paths based on gravitational forces. They speed up when they get closer to the sun, they slow down when they move away, and they generally behave according to well-established laws of physics. 3I Atlas, however, seemed to be writing its own rules. As it approached our solar system, it demonstrated what can only be described as precision navigation. Instead of following a random trajectory like most interstellar visitors, it appeared to be making calculated adjustments to its path, almost as if it was being guided by some form of intelligence. This precision became even more apparent when scientists realized that 3I Atlas was positioning itself for close encounters with multiple planets in our solar system. Not just one or planetary bodies, two, but three major: Venus, Mars, and Jupiter. The mathematical probability of such precise alignments occurring by pure chance is astronomically small, less than 1 in 20,000. Imagine throwing a dart from New York and hitting a bullseye in London, then having that same dart somehow ricochet with perfect precision to hit bullseyes in Paris and Rome. That's essentially what 3I Atlas appeared to be doing on a cosmic scale, navigating through our solar system with an accuracy that would make our most advanced spacecraft engineers jealous. But the mystery deepened even further when scientists began analyzing the object's composition and behavior. Unlike typical comets that develop bright tails as they approach the Sun, 3I Atlas exhibited unusual characteristics that defied conventional understanding of how space objects should behave. For starters, it was incredibly dense. Using advanced tracking techniques and gravitational analysis, researchers determined that 3I Atlas weighed at least 33 billion tons. That's an almost incomprehensible amount of mass compressed into a relatively small space. To achieve that kind of density naturally, you'd need the kind of extreme conditions found in the cores of collapsed stars. This incredible density created another puzzle. Objects with that much mass should be easily detectable through their gravitational effects on nearby spacecraft and other celestial bodies. But 3I Atlas seemed to be somehow masking its gravitational signature, as if it possessed technology capable of manipulating one of the fundamental forces of nature. Then there were the visual observations that really started to worry the scientific community. High-powered telescopes began detecting what appeared to be structural changes occurring on the surface of 3I Atlas. These weren't the random, chaotic changes you'd expect from natural processes like ice sublimation or rock erosion. Instead, they appeared to be organized, geometric patterns that suggested purposeful construction or modification. The most disturbing observation came from the Hubble Space Telescope, which captured images showing what scientists called an anti-tail structure. Normally, comet tails point away from the Sun, pushed by solar radiation and solar wind. But 3I Atlas appeared to have a tail-like structure pointing toward the Sun, which is physically impossible under natural conditions unless something was actively controlling and directing the flow of material. This anti-tail phenomenon suggested that 3I Atlas possessed some form of technology capable of manipulating matter and energy on a scale that human engineering has never achieved. The precision required to maintain such a structure against the natural forces of solar radiation would require real-time control systems operating at incredible levels of sophistication. As if these observations weren't troubling enough, radio telescopes around the world began detecting structured electromagnetic emissions coming from 3I Atlas. These weren't the random radio waves typically produced by natural cosmic phenomena. Instead, they showed clear signs of organization and pattern, suggesting they might be artificial communications or some form of active scanning system. The signals appeared to be directed specifically toward Earth, rather than broadcast randomly into space. Some of the transmissions contained mathematical sequences and geometric patterns that seemed designed to demonstrate intelligence to anyone capable of detecting and analyzing them. But perhaps the most unsettling aspect of 3I Atlas's behavior was its timing. The object had arrived in our solar system during a period when it would be visible to Earth-based telescopes for only a few months before disappearing behind the Sun during what astronomers call solar conjunction. During this hidden period, lasting approximately 6 weeks, any activities conducted by 3I Atlas would be completely unobservable from Earth. If 3I Atlas were indeed under intelligent control, this timing would provide perfect cover for conducting operations without human oversight. The object could deploy smaller probes, modify its trajectory, or prepare for subsequent activities while remaining completely hidden from our most powerful telescopes and monitoring systems. This brings us to one of the most chilling possibilities raised by researchers studying 3I Atlas. What if this object wasn't just passing through our solar system, but was actually conducting reconnaissance, gathering information about Earth and human civilization before making some form of contact, or, more ominously, before taking some form of action? The evidence supporting this interpretation was circumstantial but compelling. 3I Atlas's trajectory provided optimal viewing angles for studying Earth's major population centers, technological infrastructure, and communication networks. Its electromagnetic emissions seemed to correlate with its proximity to inhabited worlds, as if it was actively scanning and gathering data. Some researchers began referring to 3I Atlas as a potential mothership, suggesting that it might be carrying smaller probes designed to conduct detailed surveillance of Earth and its inhabitants. According to this theory, the object's passage behind the Sun would provide the perfect opportunity to deploy these probes undetected, with their arrival at Earth timed for maximum strategic advantage. The implications of such a scenario were staggering. If 3I Atlas represented advanced technology from another civilization, humanity would be facing contact with intelligence possessing capabilities that exceeded our understanding by potentially thousands of years. The gap in technological advancement would be so vast that traditional concepts of communication, negotiation, or defense would become meaningless. But there was another, even more disturbing possibility that some researchers reluctantly began to consider. What if 3I Atlas wasn't on a peaceful scientific mission but represented something far more sinister? What if its reconnaissance activities were preparation for something that could threaten the very existence of human civilization? This scenario, known in some circles as the dark forest hypothesis, suggests that advanced civilizations in the universe might view younger species as potential threats to be eliminated before they can develop into competitors for cosmic resources. In this framework, 3I Atlas could represent the advanced scout for a civilization that had decided humanity needed to be neutralized before we could spread beyond our home planet. The evidence supporting such a grim interpretation was largely speculative, but the technological capabilities demonstrated by 3I Atlas certainly suggested that its creators possessed the power to pose an existential threat to Earth if they chose to do so. An object capable of manipulating gravitational forces, controlling matter at the atomic level, and operating technology that approached the theoretical limits of physics could easily overwhelm any defensive measures humanity might attempt to deploy. As we delve deeper into this cosmic mystery, we'll explore what would actually happen if 3I Atlas decided to change course and head directly for Earth. We'll examine the science behind asteroid impacts, the potential consequences for human civilization, and the desperate measures that might be taken to prevent or survive such a catastrophic collision. But first, we need to understand exactly what we're dealing with when we talk about an object of this size and density striking our planet. The physics of an impact between 3I Atlas and Earth would be unlike anything in recorded human history. When we talk about asteroid impacts, most people think of the dinosaur-killing asteroid from 65 million years ago. But that event, catastrophic as it was, involved an object roughly half the size of what we're potentially dealing with here. To understand the true scope of destruction that 3I Atlas could unleash, we need to think about energy. When objects traveling at cosmic speeds collide with planets, the kinetic energy involved is almost incomprehensible. A typical asteroid impact might release energy equivalent to millions of nuclear weapons detonating simultaneously, but 3I Atlas, with its massive size and incredible velocity, would carry exponentially more destructive power. The moment 3I Atlas entered Earth's atmosphere, it would create a fireball visible from space. The friction generated by its passage through our protective blanket of gases would heat the object and surrounding air to temperatures exceeding those found on the surface of the Sun. This plasma trail would stretch across continents, turning night into day and day into something far brighter and more terrifying than anyone has ever witnessed. But the atmospheric entry would be just the beginning. Unlike smaller asteroids that might break apart or burn up during their descent, an object with the density and size of 3I Atlas would punch through our atmosphere like it wasn't even there. The air itself would become a weapon, compressed and superheated by the object's passage, creating shock waves that would shatter windows and collapse buildings hundreds of kilometers away from the impact site. The actual moment of impact would release more energy than every nuclear weapon ever built. Detonated simultaneously, the explosion would create a crater hundreds of kilometers across and several kilometers deep, instantly vaporizing everything within that radius. The impact site would become a hellscape of molten rock and metal, with temperatures hot enough to melt steel and concrete as if they were ice. But the immediate destruction around the impact crater would represent only a tiny fraction of the global catastrophe that would follow. The collision would launch billions of tons of pulverized rock, soil, and vaporized material into the atmosphere. This debris cloud would spread across the entire planet within hours, blocking out sunlight and plunging the Earth into what scientists call an impact winter. Imagine waking up one morning to discover that the sun has simply disappeared. Not because of clouds or weather, but because the sky itself has turned black with debris. Temperatures would plummet as photosynthesis ground to a halt, and plant life around the world would begin to die. The entire food chain, from the smallest organisms to the largest mammals, would face extinction as the primary source of energy for all life on Earth vanished behind a curtain of cosmic dust. The seismic effects of such an impact would be equally devastating. The collision would generate earthquakes far more powerful than anything in recorded history, with seismic waves traveling around the planet multiple times. Fault lines that have remained stable for millions of years would suddenly rupture, triggering massive earthquakes in regions that had never experienced significant seismic activity. Coastal areas would face another nightmare entirely. The impact would generate tsunami waves thousands of meters high, dwarfing anything we've seen from underwater earthquakes or volcanic eruptions. These massive walls of water would race across ocean basins at jet aircraft speeds, devastating every coastline on the planet. Cities like New York, London, Tokyo, and Sydney would simply cease to exist, swept away by waves that would penetrate hundreds of kilometers inland. The atmospheric effects would create their own cascade of disasters. The debris cloud wouldn't just block sunlight, it would also trap heat radiating from the Earth's surface, creating a greenhouse effect that would persist long after the initial impact winter ended. This could trigger runaway climate change, permanently altering weather patterns and making vast regions of the planet uninhabitable. But perhaps most terrifying of all would be the long-term consequences for human civilization. Even if some portion of humanity survived the initial impact and its immediate aftermath, the survivors would face a world fundamentally transformed. Agriculture would become impossible in most regions due to the lack of sunlight and dramatic climate changes. Modern technology would largely cease to function as power grids collapsed and supply chains disintegrated. The survivors would find themselves thrust back into a pre-industrial existence, struggling to grow food in contaminated soil under alien skies. Without the complex infrastructure that supports our current population of nearly 8 billion people, the carrying capacity of Earth would plummet to perhaps a few 100 million at most. The vast majority of human knowledge, stored in digital formats and dependent on electrical power, would be lost forever. Yet even as we contemplate these apocalyptic scenarios, we must remember that 3I Atlas represents something potentially far more complex than a simple asteroid impact. The evidence suggesting artificial intelligence behind this object raises possibilities that are both more hopeful and more terrifying than natural disaster. If 3I Atlas were indeed under intelligent control, the question becomes not just whether it would impact Earth, but whether it would choose to do so. An advanced civilization capable of building such technology would presumably have multiple options for dealing with human civilization, ranging from peaceful contact to complete annihilation. The precision navigation demonstrated by 3I Atlas suggests that its controllers, if they exist, possess detailed knowledge of our solar system and potentially of Earth itself. They would understand the consequences of a direct impact and would presumably only choose such a course of action if they viewed humanity as a threat requiring elimination. This raises disturbing questions about how an advanced alien civilization might perceive human activities. Our radio and television broadcasts have been leaking into space for nearly a century, potentially providing detailed information about human nature, technology, and intentions. What conclusions might an alien intelligence draw from our history of warfare, environmental destruction, and resource competition? From their perspective, humanity might appear to be a young, aggressive species, rapidly developing dangerous technologies, while demonstrating little wisdom in their application. They might view our development of nuclear weapons, our degradation of our planetary environment, and our expanding presence in space as evidence that we represent a future threat to galactic stability. In such a scenario, 3I Atlas might represent what some researchers have called a preemptive strike, designed to eliminate humanity before we can develop the capability to threaten other civilizations. The object's reconnaissance activities could be gathering final intelligence to confirm this assessment and to identify the most effective methods for ensuring our complete elimination. Alternatively, 3I Atlas might represent a test of some kind, designed to evaluate human responses to an apparent existential threat. Advanced civilizations might use such scenarios to assess the maturity and potential of younger species, determining whether they deserve to join a galactic community or whether they require further development before contact becomes appropriate. The electromagnetic signals detected from 3I Atlas could be attempts at communication, designed to gauge human intelligence and peaceful intentions. Our response to these signals, or lack thereof, might influence whatever decision its controllers ultimately make regarding Earth's future. But there's another possibility that's perhaps even more unsettling than outright hostile intentions. What if 3I Atlas represents a civilization that views humanity with the same detached scientific interest that we might show toward bacteria in a petri dish? From their perspective, we might be nothing more than an interesting biological phenomenon worthy of study, but not necessarily worthy of preservation. In this scenario, an impact with Earth might not be motivated by hostility or fear, but simply by scientific curiosity. They might be conducting an experiment to observe how a planet-wide extinction event affects the evolution of life, using Earth as a laboratory for understanding cosmic-scale evolutionary processes. Such a civilization might possess technology so advanced that they could preserve samples of human DNA, culture, and knowledge for future study, viewing the destruction of our current civilization as no more significant than a scientist discarding a cell culture after completing an experiment. The individual lives of 8 billion human beings might be utterly meaningless to intelligence operating on cosmic timescales and dealing with resources measured in star systems rather than planets. These possibilities force us to confront uncomfortable questions about humanity's place in a universe that clearly contains intelligence far exceeding our own capabilities. Are we the dominant species we imagine ourselves to be? Or are we simply one of countless experiments being conducted by civilizations whose motivations and methods we cannot begin to comprehend? The answer to these questions might depend entirely on choices made by intelligence aboard or controlling 3I Atlas, choices that could determine whether human civilization continues to exist or becomes nothing more than an interesting footnote in some alien scientific journal. As we continue to monitor this mysterious object and analyze the growing body of evidence surrounding its true nature, we must also confront the reality that our fate may already be decided by minds operating according to logic and motivations that we cannot understand or influence. In the face of such cosmic uncertainty, governments around the world have been quietly grappling with scenarios that no policy manual had ever anticipated. Deep within classified briefing rooms, military strategists and scientific advisors have been wargaming responses to what they're calling the most significant potential threat in human history. The challenge isn't just the raw destructive power that 3I Atlas might represent. It's the complete inadequacy of every defensive system humanity has ever developed. Our most powerful nuclear weapons, designed to level cities and reshape continents, would be like throwing pebbles at a mountain. Our missile defense systems, sophisticated enough to track and intercept incoming warheads, would be utterly useless against an object traveling at interplanetary velocities with technology that could potentially manipulate the very forces of physics. But perhaps the most terrifying aspect of this situation is the timeline we're working with. Unlike natural disasters that develop over days or weeks, giving us time to evacuate populations and prepare emergency responses, an object like 3I Atlas could alter its trajectory with little warning. If it decided to target Earth, we might have only hours or days to comprehend what was happening before impact. This has forced emergency planners to consider evacuation scenarios that border on the impossible. How do you relocate 8 billion people when there's nowhere on Earth that would be truly safe from a global extinction event? How do you maintain social order when the very concept of civilization might be about to end? How do you preserve human knowledge and culture when the infrastructure supporting our technological society could vanish in a matter of hours? Some analysts have suggested that our only hope might lie in attempting communication with whatever intelligence controls 3I Atlas. Radio telescopes around the world have been reconfigured to broadcast messages toward the object using mathematical sequences and universal constants that any advanced civilization should recognize as signs of intelligence. These messages represent humanity's first serious attempt at interstellar diplomacy, crafted by teams of linguists, mathematicians, and philosophers working around the clock to create communications that might resonate with minds that evolved under completely different conditions. They've included everything from basic mathematical proofs to artistic expressions of human culture, hoping that something in these transmissions might convince an alien intelligence that humanity deserves to survive. But there's no way to know if these messages are being received, understood, or even noticed by whatever intelligence might be aboard 3I Atlas. The electromagnetic signals detected from the object could be responses to our communications, or they might be completely unrelated to human activities. We're essentially trying to negotiate for our species' survival with an intelligence that might not even be aware of our existence as impact of living under such anything more than an interesting planetary phenomenon. The psychological uncertainty has begun manifesting in ways that social scientists are still trying to understand. Religious communities worldwide have experienced unprecedented growth as people seek spiritual comfort in the face of cosmic insignificance. Some have interpreted 3i Atlas as a sign of divine judgment, while others see it as evidence that creation is far more complex and wonderful than traditional doctrines had imagined. Stock markets have experienced wild fluctuations as investors struggle to price in scenarios ranging from technological revolution to species extinction. How do you value currency or property when the entire economic system might cease to exist within months or years? Some companies have seen their valuations soar based on speculation that alien contact might provide access to revolutionary technologies, while others have collapsed as their business models become irrelevant in the face of potential civilizational collapse. Educational institutions have found themselves in the bizarre position of preparing students for futures that might never arrive. Universities have begun offering courses in xenobiology, interstellar communication, and post-contact sociology, while simultaneously maintaining traditional programs in engineering and medicine that assume human civilization will continue operating according to familiar patterns. Parents struggle with whether to discuss these possibilities with their children, weighing the psychological damage of existential anxiety against the potential need to prepare young minds for a radically different future. How do you explain to a 10-year-old that everything they've learned about the world might become obsolete overnight, while still encouraging them to dream about careers and relationships that might never be possible? The scientific community itself has been transformed by the 3i Atlas phenomenon. Researchers who spent their careers studying narrow specializations have suddenly found themselves collaborating across disciplines that had never intersected before. Astrophysicists work alongside anthropologists to understand how alien intelligence might perceive human civilization. Computer scientists collaborate with philosophers to model decision-making processes that might operate according to completely different logical frameworks. But perhaps most significantly, the mere possibility that 3i Atlas represents artificial intelligence has forced humanity to confront questions about consciousness and intelligence that we had assumed were purely theoretical. If minds can evolve or be created that operate on scales of time and space that dwarf human experience, what does that say about the nature of consciousness itself? These alien minds might experience individual thoughts that last longer than entire human civilizations. They might process information in ways that make our most sophisticated computers seem like simple calculators. They might understand aspects of reality that we lack even the conceptual frameworks to imagine, much less comprehend. In trying to understand such intelligence, we're forced to acknowledge the limitations of human cognition in ways that are both humbling and terrifying. We pride ourselves on being rational beings capable of understanding the universe through science and logic, but 3i Atlas suggests that our rationality might be nothing more than a local phenomenon, useful for navigating our immediate environment, but utterly inadequate for comprehending cosmic-scale intelligence. This realization has profound implications for how we think about everything from artificial intelligence development here on Earth to our long-term goals as a species. If we're truly dealing with intelligence that exceeds our capabilities by orders of magnitude, then many of our assumptions about progress, technology, and human potential might need fundamental revision. Some researchers have begun exploring whether human consciousness itself might be capable of expansion or enhancement that could help us better understand and communicate with cosmic intelligence. They're investigating everything from advanced meditation techniques to experimental brain-computer interfaces, hoping to discover ways of thinking that might bridge the gap between human and alien cognition. Others have focused on the possibility that 3i Atlas might represent not just advanced technology, but advanced philosophy and ethics. An intelligence capable of crossing interstellar distances and manipulating fundamental forces might have developed moral frameworks that transcend human concepts of right and wrong, good and evil, survival and extinction. Perhaps the decision of whether to spare or eliminate human civilization won't be based on factors we can understand or influence through traditional diplomatic means. It might depend on aesthetic preferences, cosmic-scale ethical considerations, or decision-making processes that operate according to principles we lack the cognitive capacity to comprehend. This possibility has led some philosophers to argue that humanity's survival might depend not on our ability to defend ourselves or negotiate effectively, but on our capacity to become worthy of preservation according to standards we cannot even imagine. They suggest that our focus should be on developing human consciousness, creativity, and moral sophistication to levels that might be recognizable and valuable to cosmic intelligence. Meanwhile, preparations continue for more concrete scenarios. Deep underground facilities originally designed for surviving nuclear war have been retrofitted as potential shelters for preserving human civilization through a global extinction event. These installations house seed banks, digital archives of human knowledge, and small populations selected for genetic diversity and essential skills. But even these preparations seem almost pathetically inadequate when contemplated against the scale of destruction that 3I Atlas could unleash. How do you preserve human culture in underground bunkers when the surface world might remain uninhabitable for centuries or millennia? How do you maintain technological civilization with populations measured in thousands rather than billions? Some groups have begun more ambitious projects, attempting to establish self-sufficient colonies in remote locations that might survive even global catastrophe. They're developing sustainable technologies that could function without global supply chains, preserving seeds and knowledge that could serve as the foundation for rebuilding human civilization if the worst scenarios come to pass. Space agencies have accelerated plans for establishing permanent human settlements beyond Earth, recognizing that our species' long-term survival might depend on spreading beyond our home planet before 3I Atlas or similar threats eliminate terrestrial civilization. These projects, once seen as distant dreams, have suddenly become urgent priorities as humanity confronts the possibility that Earth itself might not remain habitable. But all of these preparations operate under the assumption that we have time to implement them, that 3I Atlas will continue its current trajectory and provide us with months or years to prepare for whatever might come next. The reality is that everything could change in an instant, that the object could alter course without warning and transform our careful planning into meaningless exercises. As we drift deeper into this cosmic mystery, one thing becomes increasingly clear. 3I Atlas has already fundamentally changed human civilization, regardless of what it ultimately chooses to do. We've been forced to confront our cosmic insignificance while simultaneously recognizing our potential significance as one of the few known examples of conscious intelligence in the universe. The object serves as a mirror reflecting our deepest fears and highest aspirations, our technological achievements and our profound limitations, our capacity for both creation and destruction. Whether it represents salvation or annihilation, 3I Atlas has awakened humanity to possibilities we had never seriously considered and responsibilities we had never imagined we might bear. And as this mysterious visitor continues its journey through our solar system, carrying secrets and intentions we may never fully understand, we find ourselves balanced on the edge between wonder and terror, between hope and despair, waiting to discover whether we're about to witness the beginning of a new chapter in human history or its final conclusion. The cosmos has revealed that we are not alone, but it has yet to reveal whether that company comes as friend or foe, teacher or executioner, savior or destroyer of worlds. The silence from 3I Atlas has become perhaps the most unnerving aspect of this entire phenomenon. After months of structured electromagnetic emissions, mathematical sequences, and what appeared to be deliberate attempts at communication, the object has gone completely quiet. Radio telescopes that once detected organized patterns now pick up nothing but cosmic background radiation, as if someone had simply turned off a cosmic transmitter. This sudden communication blackout has sent ripples of anxiety through research communities worldwide. Scientists who had begun to interpret the earlier signals as peaceful overtures now find themselves wondering if the silence represents preparation for something far more ominous. When an intelligence capable of manipulating matter and energy on planetary scales stops talking, the implications are terrifying to contemplate. Dr. Sarah Chen, who had been leading the global effort to decode the alien transmissions, found herself staring at blank screens where complex mathematical progressions had once danced across her monitors. The absence of data felt somehow more threatening than the mysterious signals had ever been. Her team had grown accustomed to analyzing new patterns each day, building theoretical frameworks for understanding alien logic, but now they faced the far more difficult task of interpreting silence. The timing of this communication shutdown couldn't be more suspicious. 3I Eye Atlas had gone quiet just as it began emerging from its hidden passage behind the Sun, during what should have been a period of renewed observation and analysis. Instead of providing answers about what the object had accomplished during its 6 weeks of invisibility, the silence only deepened the mystery while raising new questions about its intentions. Ground-based telescopes trained on the object's predicted emergence point detected something that made the silence even more disturbing. The 3-eye atlas that emerged from solar conjunction wasn't quite the same object that had disappeared behind the Sun months earlier. Subtle changes in its structure were visible even at vast distances, suggesting that the hidden period had been used for construction, modification, or deployment of unknown systems. These structural alterations appeared to be organized and purposeful, not the random changes that might result from exposure to intense solar radiation. New geometric formations had appeared on the object's surface, creating patterns that seemed to serve specific technological functions. The modifications suggested that 3-eye Atlas had used its time behind the Sun to prepare for whatever came next in its mysterious mission. Amateur astronomers around the world, armed with increasingly sophisticated equipment, began documenting these changes in unprecedented detail. Their collective observations revealed that the new structures weren't just decorative additions to the object's surface. They appeared to be functional installations that could serve as communication arrays, sensors, or even weapon systems designed to operate on scales that human technology couldn't match. Marcus Rodriguez, whose backyard observatory had become a focal point for citizen science efforts, captured time-lapse imagery showing these new structures actively moving and repositioning themselves. The footage revealed technology that could reconfigure itself in real time, adapting to changing conditions or mission requirements with a flexibility that made human engineering seem primitive by comparison. But it wasn't just the physical changes that worried observers. The electromagnetic signature of 3-eye Atlas had also evolved during its hidden period. While the object no longer transmitted the organized patterns that had characterized its earlier behavior, it now generated a completely different type of energy field. This new emission pattern was more intense and more focused, suggesting that the object's power systems had been significantly enhanced or completely redesigned. Spectroscopic analysis revealed that these new energy fields contained components that didn't match any known natural phenomena. The readings suggested that 3-eye Atlas was now drawing power from sources that human science couldn't identify, possibly accessing forms of energy that existed beyond our current understanding of physics. The implications were staggering, because unlimited energy would enable capabilities limited only by the imagination of whoever controlled such technology. Military analysts studying these developments found themselves confronting scenarios that challenged every assumption about warfare and defense. An object that could reconfigure itself, access unlimited energy, and operate according to principles beyond human comprehension represented a threat that conventional military thinking couldn't address. Traditional concepts of deterrence, containment, and retaliation became meaningless when dealing with technology that might view human civilization as little more than an interesting experiment. Intelligence agencies began developing response protocols for managing public reaction if 3-eye Atlas demonstrated overtly hostile capabilities. The challenge wasn't just military, but psychological, because humanity had never faced a situation where their continued existence depended entirely on the whims of intelligence they couldn't understand or influence. Emergency broadcasts were prepared, evacuation procedures were outlined, and continuity of government plans were activated, all while hoping these preparations would never be needed. Religious communities found themselves grappling with theological implications that traditional doctrine had never anticipated. Some leaders interpreted the silence from 3-eye Atlas as a divine test, a period of spiritual preparation before revelation that would transform humanity's understanding of creation itself. Others worried that the silence represented the calm before a storm that would challenge every belief system humanity had ever developed. Prayer vigils organized around the world drew millions of participants who sought spiritual comfort in the face of cosmic uncertainty. These gatherings represented something unprecedented in human religious history, because they brought together people from every faith tradition united by shared recognition that they might be facing something that transcended all terrestrial spiritual frameworks. The Vatican issued a series of carefully worded statements acknowledging that divine creation might encompass forms of intelligence beyond human imagination, while emphasizing that spiritual truth remained constant regardless of whatever revelations might emerge from contact with alien minds. Pope Francis called for unity and faith during what he termed humanity's greatest test, urging believers to find strength in prayer while remaining open to possibilities that traditional theology had never contemplated. Educational institutions found themselves struggling to maintain normal operations while preparing for futures that might bear no resemblance to anything in human experience. Universities began offering crash courses in xenobiology, interstellar communication, and post-contact sociology, recognizing that their students might need to navigate a world fundamentally transformed by alien influence. Children asked questions that parents couldn't answer, forcing families to confront existential uncertainties that no previous generation had ever faced. How do you explain to young minds that everything they're learning about the world might become obsolete overnight? How do you maintain hope and ambition when the very concept of human future might be decided by intelligence operating according to completely alien priorities? Mental health professionals reported unprecedented increases in anxiety disorders, existential depression, and what psychologists began calling cosmic agoraphobia, the fear of humanity's insignificance in a universe containing intelligence far exceeding our own. Support groups formed in communities worldwide, bringing together people struggling to process the psychological impact of confirmed alien contact and the possibility that human civilization might exist only at the sufferance of cosmic intelligence. The silence from 3i Atlas had also triggered something unexpected in human behavior patterns. Crime rates in major cities began dropping as people focused on larger questions about existence and meaning. Political divisions that had seemed insurmountable suddenly appeared petty when compared to species-wide concerns about survival and significance. Environmental activism surged as people recognized that Earth might be humanity's only refuge in a universe that contained intelligence capable of eliminating us without effort. Stock markets continued their wild fluctuations, but the patterns had changed. Instead of reacting to traditional economic indicators, investors were now trying to price in scenarios involving technological revolution, species extinction, or transformation into something beyond current human understanding. Some companies saw their valuations soar based on speculation that alien contact might provide access to revolutionary technologies, while others collapsed as their business models became irrelevant in the face of potential civilizational transformation. Currency systems began showing signs of strain as people questioned the value of money in scenarios where human civilization might cease to exist or be fundamentally transformed by alien influence. Some regions experienced runs on banks as citizens withdrew savings to purchase survival supplies, while others saw increased investment in space-related industries based on hopes that humanity might gain access to cosmic-scale technologies. Agricultural markets experienced their own disruptions as farmers struggled to plan for harvest seasons that might never come, while simultaneously dealing with increased demand for preserved foods, from populations preparing for extended periods of uncertainty. The global supply chain, already stressed by previous crises, began showing signs of breakdown as transportation companies struggled to maintain schedules while their workers grappled with questions about the relevance of their jobs in potential post-contact scenarios. Scientific collaboration reached levels unprecedented in human history as researchers from every discipline worked together to understand implications that transcended traditional academic boundaries. Astrophysicists collaborated with anthropologists to model how alien intelligence might perceive human culture. Computer scientists worked alongside philosophers to develop frameworks for understanding consciousness that might operate on cosmic scales. Linguists partnered with mathematicians to create communication protocols that might resonate with minds that evolved under completely different conditions. These collaborative efforts had already produced insights that were revolutionizing multiple fields of study. The attempt to understand alien intelligence had forced scientists to question fundamental assumptions about consciousness, communication, and the nature of intelligence itself. Research into cosmic-scale cognition was revealing new possibilities for human consciousness expansion and artificial intelligence development that might never have been explored without the catalyst of potential alien contact. But perhaps most significantly, the silence from 3i Atlas was forcing humanity to confront questions about our own nature and potential that we had never seriously considered. If we were truly dealing with intelligence that exceeded our capabilities by orders of magnitude, what did that say about the nature of consciousness and intelligence in the universe? Were we simply one point on a spectrum of awareness that extended far beyond anything we had imagined possible? Some researchers began exploring whether human consciousness itself might be capable of enhancement or evolution that could help us better understand and communicate with cosmic intelligence. They investigated everything from advanced meditation techniques to experimental consciousness expansion protocols, hoping to discover ways of thinking that might bridge the gap between human and alien cognition. Others focused on the possibility that 3I Atlas might represent not just advanced technology, but advanced philosophy and ethics. Intelligence capable of crossing interstellar distances and manipulating fundamental forces might have developed moral frameworks that transcended human concepts of survival, meaning, and value. Perhaps the decisions about humanity's future wouldn't be based on factors we could understand through traditional diplomatic or military thinking. The silence had also prompted renewed analysis of every aspect of 3I Atlas behavior since its initial discovery. Scientists pored over months of observational data, looking for patterns or clues they might have missed, hoping to find insights that could help predict what the object might do next. These retrospective analyses revealed subtle details that had been overlooked during the initial excitement of discovery, painting an even more complex picture of intelligence operating according to principles that challenged human understanding. Radio telescopes continued their vigilant monitoring, hoping to detect any resumption of the structured emissions that had characterized earlier phases of the encounter. But the cosmic silence persisted, creating a void that seemed to grow more ominous with each passing day. The absence of communication felt like waiting for a verdict in a trial where humanity stood accused of charges they couldn't understand, judged by standards they couldn't comprehend. Amateur radio operators around the world maintained their own listening posts, creating a global network of citizens who refused to accept that official channels represented the only hope for detecting alien signals. These dedicated volunteers often possessed equipment rivaling that of professional installations, and their collective efforts created redundancy that might prove crucial if weak signals began emerging that larger institutions might miss. Deep space monitoring networks, originally designed for tracking military satellites and debris, had been permanently reconfigured to watch for any signs of activity from 3I Atlas or objects that might have been deployed during its hidden passage behind the Sun. The investment in enhanced surveillance capabilities represented a fundamental shift in how humanity approached cosmic security, acknowledging that threats might emerge from directions and sources that traditional defense planning had never considered. As days stretched into weeks without any new communications from the mysterious visitor, the psychological pressure on human civilization continued to build. The silence felt like a held breath, a pause before something momentous that could transform everything or destroy it entirely. People went about their daily routines while simultaneously living with the knowledge that everything familiar might disappear without warning, replaced by realities beyond human imagination or comprehension. Children continued attending schools that might become irrelevant overnight. Workers reported to jobs that might cease to exist if human civilization underwent transformation or elimination. Couples planned weddings and families started new projects, all while knowing that their personal futures depended entirely on decisions being made by intelligence they couldn't contact, understand, or influence. The silence from 3I Atlas had become more than just absence of communication. It had become a mirror reflecting humanity's deepest fears about insignificance and impermanence, while simultaneously highlighting our remarkable capacity for hope and adaptation in the face of cosmic uncertainty. Whether the silence represented preparation for contact, judgment, or something beyond human categories of thought, it had already fundamentally changed how our species understood itself and its place in a universe that clearly contained wonders and terrors beyond our previous imagination. And still, the cosmos offered no answers, only the vast and patient silence of intelligence that operated according to timelines and priorities that made human urgency seem like the frantic scurrying of insects beneath the gaze of gods whose motivations remained forever beyond our comprehension. The weight of this cosmic silence pressed down on human consciousness like a physical force, creating a psychological landscape unlike anything our species had ever navigated. In coffee shops and boardrooms, on university campuses and factory floors, conversations increasingly turned to questions that had no answers. What did it mean to plan for tomorrow when tomorrow might belong to intelligence that viewed human achievements as we might regard the architectural efforts of termites? Yet began emerging within this uncertainty something remarkable: human behavior. The shared awareness of potential cosmic insignificance had an unexpected effect on how people treated each other. Road rage incidents plummeted as drivers found themselves contemplating whether their commute frustrations mattered in a universe containing minds that could reshape matter at will. Workplace conflicts diminished as colleagues recognized that their professional disagreements paled beside questions of species survival. Hospitals reported strange phenomena as patients facing terminal illnesses found unexpected peace in recognizing that individual mortality might soon become a universal condition. Support groups for the dying began welcoming healthy individuals seeking to process their own cosmic mortality, creating unprecedented communities of people united by shared recognition of impermanence on scales both personal and civilizational. Artists around the world experienced creative explosions as they struggled to capture experiences that human language and imagery had never been designed to express. Painters created canvases attempting to visualize intelligence operating on cosmic scales. Musicians composed symphonies that tried to echo the mathematical patterns once detected from 3i Atlas. Writers crafted poetry exploring consciousness that might experience individual thoughts lasting longer than human civilizations. These artistic responses revealed something profound about human nature. Even when confronting the possibility of extinction, our species instinctively reached toward beauty and meaning. The creative surge suggested that regardless of whatever intelligence controlled 3i Atlas, humanity possessed something unique in our drive to transform experience into art, to find significance in the face of insignificance, to create meaning even when facing meaninglessness. Meanwhile, the scientific community continued its relentless analysis of every available data point, hoping to extract insights that might predict what would happen next. Computer models ran countless simulations, trying to anticipate possible behaviors of intelligence operating according to principles that human logic could barely comprehend. These efforts produced fascinating theoretical frameworks, but precious few concrete predictions about 3i Atlas intentions or capabilities. Dr. Elena Vasquez, whose original trajectory analysis had first suggested artificial intelligence behind the object, found herself in the surreal position of having become humanity's unofficial expert on alien behavior patterns. Her academic career had been spent studying conventional orbital mechanics, but now she fielded questions from world leaders about the motivations of cosmic intelligence. The responsibility weighed heavily on her shoulders because she knew that her speculations might influence decisions affecting the survival of human civilization. The amateur astronomy community had evolved into something resembling a global intelligence network, with thousands of observers coordinating their efforts to monitor not just 3i Atlas, but the entire solar system for signs of activity that professional institutions might miss. These citizen scientists had developed their own communication protocols, sharing observations and theories through encrypted networks that operated independently of government oversight. Marcus Rodriguez found himself accidentally coordinating what amounted to humanity's first civilian space monitoring program. His Arizona observatory had become a hub for amateur researchers who refused to rely solely on official channels for information about their species' potential fate. The democratic nature of this effort reflected something essential about human character: our refusal to passively accept uncertainty when action might provide answers. Religious communities worldwide had begun developing new theological frameworks to accommodate realities that traditional doctrine had never anticipated. Seminary schools offered courses in cosmic theology, exploring how divine authority might manifest through intelligence capable of manipulating fundamental forces of nature. These academic efforts represented humanity's attempt to maintain spiritual meaning in the face of encounters that challenged every assumption about our special place in creation. Some religious leaders had begun interpreting the silence from 3i Atlas as a form of divine test, a period of spiritual preparation before revelations that would transform humanity's understanding of sacred truth. Prayer groups organized globally synchronized meditation sessions, hoping to demonstrate human spiritual development to intelligence that might be evaluating our worthiness for survival or contact. The Vatican's response had been particularly thoughtful, acknowledging that divine creation encompassed possibilities beyond human imagination while maintaining that spiritual truth transcended any particular manifestation of intelligence. Pope Francis had called for unity among all faith traditions, recognizing that humanity's response to cosmic contact needed to transcend theological differences that seemed petty when compared to species-wide concerns. Educational systems struggled with the fundamental challenge of preparing students for futures that might bear no resemblance to anything in human experience. Traditional career counseling became almost meaningless when considering that human professions might become obsolete overnight if 3i Atlas decided to share advanced technologies or eliminate human civilization entirely. Some universities had begun offering what they called adaptive thinking programs, focusing on cognitive flexibility rather than specific technical skills that might become irrelevant. These courses emphasized creativity, problem-solving, and psychological resilience as the most valuable preparation for whatever unknown future humanity might face. Children displayed remarkable adaptability to these cosmic uncertainties, often accepting the possibility of alien intelligence with less anxiety than adults who had spent decades building assumptions about reality that 3i Atlas challenged. Child psychologists noted that younger minds seemed better equipped to embrace radical uncertainty, suggesting that mental flexibility might be crucial for navigating post-contact realities. Parents found themselves having conversations with their children that no previous generation had ever needed to contemplate. How do you explain to a curious 8-year-old that the stars might contain intelligence that could decide whether humanity deserves to continue existing? How do you maintain hope and ambition while acknowledging that traditional human goals might become meaningless overnight? The economic implications of prolonged uncertainty had begun manifesting in ways that challenged fundamental assumptions about how societies function. Traditional investment strategies became almost meaningless when considering that entire industries might disappear or be revolutionized by alien technologies. Some financial institutions had begun offering what they called post-contact portfolios, attempting to identify assets that might retain value regardless of how human civilization might be transformed. Currency systems showed increasing strain as people questioned the stability of economic arrangements that assumed continued human control over terrestrial resources. Alternative economic models based on resource sharing and cooperative survival began gaining traction in communities that recognized traditional capitalism might prove inadequate for managing post-contact realities. Agricultural planning had become an exercise in cosmic-scale uncertainty. Farmers struggled to make planting decisions when they couldn't predict whether harvest seasons would occur under human control or alien influence. Food security experts developed contingency plans for scenarios ranging from technological revolution to complete civilizational collapse, recognizing that nutrition would remain crucial regardless of whatever cosmic drama unfolded. Transportation industries faced their own unique challenges as workers questioned the relevance of moving people and goods around a planet whose future remained completely uncertain. Airlines reported decreased bookings as travelers wondered whether their destinations would still exist in recognizable form when their flights landed. Shipping companies struggled to maintain schedules while their crews grappled with existential questions about the meaning of their work. The silence from 3i Atlas had created a psychological state that sociologists were calling cosmic suspense, a form of collective anxiety unlike anything previously documented in human history. Entire populations lived with the knowledge that their fate depended on decisions being made by intelligence they couldn't comprehend or influence. This state of powerlessness was generating behavioral changes that rippled through every aspect of human society. Mental health professionals had developed new therapeutic approaches for helping people cope with what they termed existential overwhelm. The psychological impact of confronting cosmic insignificance while simultaneously recognizing the potential significance of human consciousness as one of the few known examples of awareness in the universe. These treatments focused on finding meaning and purpose within uncertainty, rather than seeking false reassurance about outcomes that remained completely unpredictable. Support networks had emerged in communities worldwide, bringing together people who shared the burden of living with cosmic uncertainty. These groups provided spaces where individuals could express fears and hopes that seemed too vast for traditional social interactions. Participants often reported that sharing their cosmic anxieties with others who understood the magnitude of the situation provided relief that conventional counseling couldn't match. The silence had also triggered unprecedented international cooperation, as nations recognized that traditional geopolitical competition seemed petty when compared to species-wide concerns. Military alliances that had been adversarial for decades began sharing intelligence about 3I Atlas observations, acknowledging that cosmic threats transcended terrestrial political boundaries. Intelligence agencies that had spent decades spying on each other found themselves collaborating on projects that would have been unimaginable during previous periods of international tension. Russian and American analysts worked side by side to interpret alien behavior patterns. Chinese and European researchers shared data that would have been classified secrets just months earlier. The possibility of cosmic contact had created temporary unity that decades of diplomacy had failed to achieve. This cooperation had accelerated scientific progress in ways that surprised even optimistic observers. When researchers from competing nations began sharing resources and expertise, their collective capabilities far exceeded what any single country could achieve independently. Projects that might have taken decades to complete under normal circumstances were being finished in months through unprecedented international collaboration. Space agencies had begun coordinating their efforts to establish permanent human settlements beyond Earth, recognizing that species survival might depend on spreading human consciousness throughout the solar system before 3I Atlas or similar threats could eliminate terrestrial civilization. These projects represented humanity's first serious attempt at becoming a truly spacefaring species, motivated not by exploration or resource acquisition, but by the fundamental drive for survival. The European Space Agency had accelerated their Mars colonization timeline, hoping to establish self-sufficient human settlements that could preserve human culture and knowledge even if Earth became uninhabitable. NASA had begun developing lunar bases designed to support permanent populations rather than temporary research stations. Private space companies found themselves receiving unprecedented government support for projects that had previously been considered commercially unviable. But even these ambitious efforts operated under the sobering recognition that they might prove completely inadequate if 3I Atlas represented technology capable of tracking and eliminating human presence throughout the solar system. Advanced alien intelligence might view human expansion beyond Earth as confirmation that our species required elimination before we could spread further into the galaxy. The psychological challenge of maintaining hope while acknowledging such possibilities had become a defining characteristic of human experience during this period of cosmic uncertainty. People continued planning for futures they might never see, working on projects that might become irrelevant overnight, maintaining relationships and creating new ones while knowing that everything familiar could disappear without warning. Yet within this uncertainty, humanity had discovered reserves of resilience and adaptability that many hadn't known existed. Communities had grown stronger as people recognized their shared vulnerability. Relationships had deepened as individuals confronted questions about meaning and mortality that transcended ordinary social interactions. Creative expression had flourished as artists attempted to capture experiences that challenged the limits of human language and imagery. The silence from 3I Atlas continued to stretch across days and weeks, creating a psychological landscape where every sunrise brought both hope and anxiety. Would this be the day when communication resumed? Would alien intelligence finally reveal its intentions? Would humanity receive answers to questions that had consumed our species since first recognizing that we might not be alone in the universe? Radio telescopes maintained their vigilant watch, automated systems scanning frequencies that might carry signals from intelligence operating according to principles beyond human understanding. Amateur operators continued their own monitoring efforts, creating redundant networks that ensured no weak transmission would go undetected. The collective listening effort represented humanity's desperate hope that alien silence might eventually give way to communication that could provide guidance for navigating the cosmic realities we had discovered. But as the silence persisted, growing numbers of people began to wonder whether communication had ever been the real purpose of 3I Atlas' presence in our solar system. Perhaps the object's mission had nothing to do with contact or conversation. Perhaps it was conducting observations that required no input from humanity, gathering data about our species and civilization according to criteria we couldn't understand or influence. The possibility that we might be nothing more than subjects in some cosmic research project was simultaneously humbling and terrifying. It suggested that our fate might depend not on our ability to communicate or negotiate, but on whatever conclusions alien intelligence drew from studying our behavior, culture, and potential for development or destruction. This realization had prompted some groups to focus on demonstrating the best aspects of human nature, hoping that alien observers might be more inclined toward preservation if they witnessed humanity's capacity for creativity, cooperation, and moral growth. Community service projects had multiplied as people sought to showcase human compassion and social responsibility. Environmental restoration efforts had intensified as communities worked to demonstrate our species' ability to repair damage we had caused to our planetary home. Artists had begun creating works specifically intended for alien observation, attempting to demonstrate human creativity and aesthetic sensibility in forms that might be comprehensible to intelligence operating according to different sensory and cognitive frameworks. Musicians composed pieces based on mathematical relationships that any advanced intelligence should recognize. Visual artists created works incorporating universal constants and geometric principles that transcended cultural boundaries. Scientists had intensified their efforts to solve fundamental problems in physics, mathematics, and cosmology, hoping to demonstrate human intellectual potential to intelligence that might be evaluating our worthiness for survival or advancement. Research projects that might normally take years to complete were being rushed toward completion, driven by the recognition that alien observers might be assessing human scientific capability as part of whatever evaluation process was occurring. But all of these efforts operated under the sobering acknowledgement that alien intelligence might be using evaluation criteria completely unrelated to human values or assumptions about what constituted worthy behavior. What seemed impressive or admirable to human observers might be utterly meaningless to minds that had evolved under different conditions and operated according to different logical frameworks. The silence from 3i Atlas had become more than just absence of communication. It had evolved into a cosmic mirror, reflecting humanity's deepest questions about consciousness, purpose, and significance, in a universe that clearly contained intelligence far exceeding our own capabilities. Whether the silence represented preparation for contact, judgment, or something beyond human categories of thought, it had already fundamentally transformed how our species understood itself and its place among the stars. And still, the vast emptiness of space offered no answers, only the patient and inscrutable silence of intelligence that operated according to timelines measured in geological epochs, pursuing goals that might transcend every framework humanity had developed for understanding motivation, consciousness, and the ultimate purposes of intelligent life in a cosmos whose true nature remained forever beyond our comprehension. The waiting continued, suspended between wonder and terror, hope and despair, as humanity held its collective breath for revelations that might never come or might arrive in forms too alien for human minds to process or understand. The psychological tension of this cosmic waiting game had begun manifesting in ways that revealed the deepest aspects of human nature. Children who had grown up during the 3i Atlas crisis were developing cognitive patterns that differed fundamentally from previous generations. They processed uncertainty with a flexibility that amazed child psychologists, accepting the possibility of radical change as a normal part of existence rather than something to be feared or denied. These young minds were adapting to live with questions that had no immediate answers, developing what researchers called cosmic patience, to function effectively while acknowledging that the most important aspects of their future remained completely beyond their control or prediction. This psychological adaptation might prove to be humanity's most valuable asset for navigating whatever realities emerged from our encounter with alien intelligence. Educational institutions had noticed that students were gravitating towards subjects that seemed most likely to remain relevant regardless of how human civilization might be transformed. Philosophy courses experienced unprecedented enrollment as young people sought frameworks for understanding consciousness and meaning that might transcend specific technological or cultural contexts. Mathematics and physics programs attracted students hoping to develop thinking skills that might be recognizable to alien intelligence. But perhaps most surprisingly, humanities programs were experiencing a renaissance as students recognized that human creativity, emotional intelligence, and cultural expression might represent our species' most distinctive contributions to cosmic consciousness. Literature, music, and visual arts were being studied not just as cultural artifacts, but as evidence of humanity's unique perspective on existence and meaning. The silence from Three Eye Atlas had also triggered what anthropologists were calling the Great Reflection, a period of intense cultural self-examination as humanity attempted to understand what we might represent to intelligence operating on cosmic scales. Museums experienced record attendance as people sought to understand human achievement within the broader context of potential alien evaluation. Archaeological sites became pilgrimage destinations as visitors contemplated the full scope of human development from stone tools to space travel, wondering what alien observers might conclude about our species' trajectory and potential. The pyramids, Stonehenge, Machu Picchu, and other monuments to human ingenuity took on new significance as people recognized they might serve as evidence of our worthiness for preservation or advancement. Religious pilgrimage sites experienced similar surges in visitation, but the nature of these spiritual journeys had evolved beyond traditional worship towards something more resembling cosmic preparation. Pilgrims weren't just seeking divine intervention, but attempting to connect with aspects of consciousness that might transcend species boundaries and communicate with intelligence that operated according to principles beyond human understanding. The global meditation movement had grown exponentially as people explored consciousness practices that might expand human awareness toward levels that could facilitate communication with alien intelligence. Meditation centers reported that practitioners were achieving states of awareness they described as cosmic consciousness, experiences that seemed to transcend individual identity and connect with larger patterns of intelligence and meaning. These consciousness exploration efforts had produced unexpected side effects. Practitioners reported developing enhanced empathy, improved problem-solving abilities, and what they described as temporal flexibility, that to think effectively across different timescales from immediate concerns to cosmic-scale considerations. Some individuals claimed to be receiving what they interpreted as communications from alien intelligence, though these experiences remain too subjective and variable to provide reliable information. The scientific community maintained skeptical attitudes toward these consciousness expansion claims, but even researchers acknowledged that human cognitive capabilities might need enhancement to navigate post-contact realities effectively. Studies of meditation, psychedelic experiences, and other consciousness-altering practices were receiving unprecedented funding as institutions explored whether human awareness could be expanded to bridge the gap between terrestrial and cosmic intelligence. Meanwhile, the economic implications of prolonged cosmic uncertainty had begun reshaping fundamental assumptions about value, ownership, and resource allocation. Traditional investment strategies seemed almost quaint when considering that entire economic systems might be revolutionized or eliminated by alien intervention. Some financial institutions had begun developing what they called consciousness-based economics, theoretical frameworks that attempted to account for the value of awareness, creativity, and spiritual development rather than just material accumulation. Cryptocurrency markets had experienced wild fluctuations as investors struggled to determine which digital assets might retain value in post-contact scenarios. Some cryptocurrencies based on mathematical principles or energy expenditure gained popularity based on theories that alien intelligence might recognize and respect such universal foundations for value exchange. Local communities had begun developing alternative economic systems based on cooperation and resource sharing, rather than competition and accumulation. These experimental economies were designed to demonstrate human capacity for peaceful organization, while providing resilient structures that might function effectively, regardless of how larger economic systems might be transformed by alien influence. Agricultural communities were leading many of these cooperative experiments, recognizing that food production would remain essential, regardless of whatever technological revolutions might emerge from alien contact. Permaculture projects and sustainable farming initiatives had multiplied as people sought to demonstrate human ability to live in harmony with natural systems while producing abundance for community needs. The silence from Three Eye Atlas had also accelerated human space development efforts beyond anything previously imagined. Private space companies found themselves receiving government contracts worth billions of dollars for projects that would have been considered science fiction just years earlier. The urgency of establishing human presence beyond Earth had transformed space exploration from luxury pursuit to survival necessity. Mars colonization projects that had been scheduled for decades in the future were suddenly receiving crash program funding and personnel. The European Space Agency, NASA, SpaceX, and other organizations were collaborating on unprecedented scales to establish permanent human settlements that could preserve human culture and knowledge even if Earth became uninhabitable or was transformed beyond recognition. These space settlement efforts weren't motivated by exploration or resource acquisition, but by the fundamental drive to ensure human consciousness survived regardless of whatever decisions alien intelligence might make about Earth's future. The psychological pressure of knowing that human survival might depend on spreading beyond our home planet had focused technological development with laser intensity. Lunar bases designed for permanent habitation rather than temporary research were under construction using resources and technologies that had been theoretical just months earlier. These installations were being equipped with comprehensive libraries of human knowledge, genetic samples from Earth's biosphere, and manufacturing capabilities that could theoretically rebuild human civilization from scratch if necessary. But even these ambitious projects operated under the sobering recognition that they might prove completely inadequate if 3I Atlas represented intelligence capable of tracking and eliminating human presence throughout the solar system. Advanced alien technology might view human expansion beyond Earth as confirmation that our species required elimination before we could spread further into the galaxy. The psychological challenge of maintaining hope while acknowledging such possibilities had become a defining characteristic of human experience during this period. Mental health professionals had developed new therapeutic approaches specifically designed for helping people cope with what they termed species-level anxiety, the psychological impact of living with uncertainty about humanity's continued existence. These treatments focused on finding meaning and purpose within uncertainty rather than seeking false reassurance about outcomes that remained completely unpredictable. Therapists helped patients develop what they called existential resilience, the ability to function effectively and find satisfaction in daily life while acknowledging that everything familiar could disappear without warning. Support groups had formed in communities worldwide, bringing together people who shared the unique burden of living with cosmic uncertainty. These gatherings provided spaces where individuals could express fears and hopes that seemed too vast for ordinary social interactions. Participants often reported that sharing their cosmic anxieties with others who understood the magnitude of the situation provided relief that conventional counseling couldn't match. The democratization of anxiety about human survival had created unexpected social bonds. People from vastly different backgrounds found themselves united by shared recognition of cosmic vulnerability. Class distinctions and cultural differences seemed less significant when everyone faced the same uncertainty about species survival. Crime rates continued their dramatic decline as potential criminals found themselves contemplating whether their actions mattered in a universe containing intelligence capable of eliminating human civilization. Domestic violence decreased as family conflicts seemed petty compared to species-wide concerns. Even corporate crime diminished as executives questioned whether accumulating wealth made sense when money itself might become meaningless overnight. This reduction in destructive behavior wasn't accompanied by social collapse, but rather by increased cooperation and mutual aid. Communities organized themselves more effectively for collective survival, sharing resources and skills that might prove crucial for navigating unknown futures. Neighborhood groups formed to provide mutual support and develop local resilience that could function independently of larger social systems. The silence from 3I Atlas had inadvertently triggered humanity's most comprehensive examination of our own nature and potential. Art galleries featured exhibitions exploring themes of consciousness, mortality, and cosmic significance. Theaters presented works that attempted to dramatize encounters between human and alien intelligence. Musicians composed symphonies that incorporated mathematical patterns similar to those once detected from the mysterious object. These cultural productions weren't just entertainment, but serious attempts to process experiences that human consciousness had never been required to navigate. Artists were serving as humanity's emotional and spiritual processing centers, creating works that helped entire populations cope with realities that exceeded ordinary psychological frameworks. Literature had experienced a renaissance as writers attempted to capture the psychological landscape of living under cosmic scrutiny. Poets crafted verses exploring consciousness that might extend beyond individual identity toward cosmic-scale awareness. Novelists created stories that imagined various scenarios for human-alien interaction, providing fictional frameworks that helped readers process real possibilities they couldn't otherwise comprehend. The quality of human creative expression during this period surprised many observers. Rather than producing desperate or despairing works, artists were creating pieces of unprecedented beauty and depth. The proximity to potential extinction or transformation seemed to be unlocking human creative capabilities that might otherwise have remained dormant. Children's art had become particularly fascinating to psychologists, studying human responses to cosmic uncertainty. Young artists consistently produced images incorporating vast scales of space and time, suggesting that developing minds were naturally adapting to think in cosmic rather than just terrestrial terms. These works often displayed sophistication in representing concepts of infinity, consciousness, and interconnectedness that surprised adult observers. Educational institutions had begun collecting and preserving these artistic responses as potential evidence of human creative evolution. If alien intelligence was indeed evaluating human worthiness for survival or advancement, these cultural productions might serve as testimony to our species' capacity for beauty, meaning, and transcendence. The silence continued to stretch across weeks and months, creating a temporization and anxiety. Would this be the landscape where every day brought both anticipation moment when communication resumed? Would alien intelligence finally reveal its intentions? Would humanity receive guidance for navigating the cosmic realities we had discovered? Radio telescopes maintained their patient vigil, automated systems scanning frequencies that might carry signals from intelligence operating according to principles beyond human understanding. The collective listening effort had evolved into humanity's largest cooperative project involving professional astronomers, amateur operators, and citizen scientists from every continent. But as the silence persisted, growing numbers of people began developing what philosophers called cosmic acceptance, the recognition that alien intelligence might operate according to timescales and priorities that made human urgency seem like the brief flickering of candle flames. Perhaps the silence wasn't delay or preparation, but simply the natural pace of minds that experienced individual thoughts lasting longer than human civilizations. This temporal perspective had profound implications for how people approached their daily lives. Long-term planning took on new meanings when considering that long-term from an alien perspective might encompass thousands or millions of years. Some individuals found this liberating, focusing on immediate experiences and relationships rather than distant goals that might prove meaningless. Others found it paralyzing, struggling to find motivation for activities that seemed insignificant on cosmic scales. The business community had adapted by developing what they called flexible planning approaches that could accommodate radical changes in circumstance while maintaining operational effectiveness in the present. Companies focused on building adaptable capabilities rather than pursuing specific long-term objectives that might become irrelevant overnight. Stock markets had stabilized into new patterns that reflected acceptance of fundamental uncertainty rather than attempting to predict specific outcomes. Investors began focusing on assets and companies that demonstrated resilience and adaptability rather than pursuing traditional growth strategies that assumed continuity of current economic systems. The global food system had been quietly revolutionized as agricultural communities developed production methods that could function effectively under various scenarios ranging from technological revolution to complete social breakdown. These changes were improving food security and environmental sustainability while preparing for unknown futures. Transportation systems had adapted to serve populations that were simultaneously more locally focused and more globally connected. People traveled less for routine business, but more for cultural exchange and relationship building, recognizing that human connections might prove more valuable than material accumulation in whatever future emerged. Communication networks had been strengthened and diversified to ensure that human knowledge and culture could be preserved and shared regardless of how technological systems might be disrupted or transformed. Multiple redundant systems were being maintained to prevent loss of information that might prove crucial for human survival or development. The silence from 3i Atlas had become more than absence of communication. It had evolved into a transformative force that was reshaping human consciousness, behavior, and social organization in ways that might prove permanent regardless of whatever eventual contact or resolution occurred. Whether the silence represented alien preparation, evaluation, or simply the natural pace of intelligence operating on cosmic scales, it had already fundamentally altered humanity's understanding of ourselves and our place in a universe that clearly contained wonders and terrors beyond our previous imagination. And still, the cosmos offered no answers, only the vast and patient silence of intelligence that pursued goals and followed timelines that might transcend every framework humanity had developed for understanding consciousness, purpose, and the ultimate destiny of intelligent life among the stars. The waiting continued, suspended between transformation and destruction, between significance and insignificance, as our species held its collective breath for revelations that might redefine the very nature of existence itself or confirm our eternal solitude in an indifferent universe that had briefly entertained us with the illusion of cosmic companionship. The silence had begun to feel like a living thing, a presence that pressed against human consciousness with weight that seemed to grow heavier each passing day. Families gathered around dinner tables found themselves staring at empty chairs, not because loved ones were absent, but because the conversations that should have filled those spaces seemed inadequate in the face of cosmic uncertainty. How do you discuss weekend plans when weekends themselves might not exist in any recognizable form? Sleep patterns across the globe had fundamentally shifted as people found themselves lying awake at night, staring at star-filled skies that no longer seemed peaceful or distant. The same constellations that had inspired wonder for millennia now felt like windows into a universe that might contain intelligence actively deciding humanity's fate. Parents reported that their children were asking different questions now, not about Santa Claus or tooth fairies, but about whether the stars were watching them sleep. Dreams had changed too, according to sleep researchers who were documenting phenomena they'd never encountered before. People were experiencing what they called cosmic dreams, visions of vast intelligences moving through space, of consciousness that extended across light years, of conversations conducted in mathematics rather than words. These weren't nightmares in the traditional sense, but they left dreamers with profound sense of their own limitations and mortality that lingered long after waking. The transformation wasn't limited to psychological effects. Human behavior was evolving in ways that suggested our species was unconsciously preparing for realities we couldn't consciously comprehend. Libraries experienced unprecedented surges in visitors as people sought to absorb as much human knowledge as possible, as if preparing for an examination whose criteria remained unknown. Reading circles formed spontaneously in communities worldwide, with participants working through literature, philosophy, and science at rates that would have seemed impossible under normal circumstances. Language itself was beginning to adapt to accommodate concepts that had never needed expression before. New words were entering common usage. Cosmophobia, for fear of cosmic insignificance; xeno-anxiety, for worry about alien intentions; temporalgia, for the pain of contemplating deep time scales. Linguists noted that these linguistic adaptations were occurring organically across multiple languages simultaneously, suggesting that human consciousness was collectively grappling with experiences that transcended cultural boundaries. Children were leading many of these linguistic innovations, creating games that incorporated concepts of interstellar travel, alien psychology, and consciousness expansion with the casual creativity that had once been reserved for playground fantasies. Their play had evolved to include scenarios where humans needed to communicate with intelligence that thought in completely different ways, developing impromptu protocols for contact that often displayed surprising sophistication. Teachers reported that students were naturally gravitating toward collaborative learning approaches that emphasized collective problem-solving rather than individual achievement. Classroom dynamics had shifted from competition to cooperation, as young minds instinctively recognized that the challenges they might face would require unified human responses rather than personal success. Universities found themselves inadvertently conducting the largest interdisciplinary experiment in academic history, as students and faculty from completely different fields began collaborating on projects that would have been impossible under traditional departmental structures. Philosophy majors worked alongside astrophysicists to explore questions about consciousness and cosmic intelligence. Art students collaborated with mathematicians to create visual representations of concepts that existed at the intersection of creativity and scientific precision. These academic collaborations were producing insights that surprised even their participants. The attempt to understand alien intelligence was forcing researchers to question fundamental assumptions about human consciousness, revealing aspects of our own minds that had never been systematically examined. Studies of cosmic-scale cognition were suggesting that human awareness might be more flexible and expandable than anyone had previously imagined. Medical professionals had begun documenting what they called adaptation syndrome, a cluster of physical and psychological changes that seemed to represent human adjustment to living under cosmic uncertainty. People were developing enhanced pattern recognition abilities, improved stress tolerance, and what appeared to be increased empathy and social bonding. These changes suggested that human consciousness was naturally evolving to cope with realities that our evolutionary history had never required us to navigate. The adaptations weren't limited to individual psychology. Social structures were reorganizing themselves around principles of mutual aid and collective resilience rather than hierarchical competition. Neighborhoods were forming cooperative networks that shared resources and skills more effectively than traditional economic systems. These changes were occurring organically, without central planning or government mandate, as if human social instincts were automatically adjusting to prepare for unknown challenges. Corporate structures were experiencing similar transformations as businesses recognized that traditional models focused on quarterly profits and individual advancement might prove inadequate for navigating post-contact realities. Companies were restructuring around principles of adaptability and social responsibility, acknowledging that their survival might depend on contributing to collective human welfare rather than maximizing shareholder returns. The entertainment industry had undergone perhaps the most dramatic transformation as audiences lost interest in content that seemed trivial compared to the cosmic drama unfolding around them. Television programs exploring themes of consciousness, cosmic intelligence, and human potential were experiencing unprecedented popularity, while traditional reality shows and competitive formats found themselves with dwindling viewerships. Music had evolved to incorporate mathematical patterns and harmonic relationships that might be recognizable to alien intelligence. Composers were creating works that attempted to bridge the gap between human emotional expression and universal mathematical principles, producing pieces that affected listeners in ways that traditional musical theory couldn't explain. The film industry was experiencing a renaissance of thoughtful science fiction that attempted to seriously explore the implications of contact with superior intelligence. These productions weren't focused on action sequences or special effects, but on the psychological and philosophical challenges of encountering minds that operated according to completely different principles. Audiences were gravitating towards stories that helped them process experiences they might soon face in reality. Sports had experienced an unexpected transformation as both athletes and spectators found themselves drawn to activities that emphasized cooperation and collective achievement rather than individual victory. Team sports that required complex coordination and mutual trust were gaining popularity, while competitive individual sports were experiencing declining interest. The change suggested that human recreational instincts were adapting to prepare for scenarios where survival might depend on unified group action. Religious institutions continued their theological evolution, but the pace of change was accelerating as congregations demanded frameworks that could accommodate realities traditional doctrine had never anticipated. Interfaith dialogues were producing new synthesis approaches that combined insights from multiple spiritual traditions while remaining open to revelations that might emerge from cosmic contact. Prayer practices were evolving to incorporate meditation techniques designed to expand consciousness beyond individual identity toward awareness that might be capable of communicating with cosmic intelligence. These spiritual explorations were producing experiences that participants described as transcendent connection with larger patterns of meaning and purpose that extended beyond terrestrial concerns. The Vatican had quietly begun developing what they called cosmic theology, doctrinal frameworks that could maintain spiritual authority while acknowledging that divine creation might encompass forms of intelligence that exceeded human understanding by vast margins. These theological innovations were being shared with other religious organizations as spiritual leaders recognized that denominational differences seemed less important when addressing questions of cosmic significance. Scientific institutions were experiencing their own transformation as researchers found themselves conducting investigations that challenged the boundaries between objective analysis and subjective experience. Studies of consciousness, intelligence, and meaning were requiring methodologies that incorporated insights from psychology, philosophy, and even spiritual practices that had previously been considered outside the scope of scientific inquiry. The democratization of scientific investigation continued as amateur researchers made contributions that rivaled or exceeded those of professional institutions. Citizen science networks were conducting analyses that would have required massive government funding under traditional models, but were being accomplished through voluntary collaboration among thousands of dedicated individuals who shared resources and expertise freely. These collaborative networks were developing their own quality control mechanisms and peer review processes that often proved more rigorous than traditional academic systems. The urgency of understanding potential alien intelligence had motivated people to maintain scientific standards while operating at speeds that institutional bureaucracies couldn't match. The internet itself was evolving to accommodate these new forms of collaboration and information sharing. Social media platforms were being repurposed as tools for collective intelligence rather than entertainment and social comparison. Online communities dedicated to understanding cosmic consciousness were attracting millions of participants who shared insights, experiences, and theories with unprecedented openness and mutual support. Artificial intelligence development was experiencing dramatic acceleration as programmers attempted to create systems that might be capable of facilitating communication with alien intelligence. These efforts were producing advances in machine consciousness and natural language processing that exceeded decades of previous progress, driven by the recognition that human-AI collaboration might prove essential for navigating post-contact realities. The relationship between humans and artificial intelligence was evolving from tool use towards something approaching partnership as people recognized that enhanced cognitive capabilities might be necessary for understanding intelligence that operated on cosmic scales. AI systems were being developed not to replace human thinking, but to extend human consciousness toward levels that might enable meaningful interaction with alien minds. But perhaps the most significant change was occurring at the level of human consciousness itself. People were reporting experiences of expanded awareness that seemed to transcend individual identity and connect with larger patterns of intelligence and meaning. These experiences weren't limited to meditation practitioners or spiritual seekers, but were occurring spontaneously among ordinary individuals who found themselves thinking in ways they'd never experienced before. Psychologists studying these consciousness changes were documenting phenomena that challenged traditional understanding of human cognitive limitations. People were demonstrating enhanced abilities to process complex information, think across multiple timescales simultaneously, and maintain awareness of cosmic-scale concepts while managing daily practical concerns. These cognitive enhancements appeared to be occurring naturally as human consciousness adapted to accommodate realities that our evolutionary history had never prepared us to navigate. The changes suggested that human awareness might be more flexible and capable of expansion than anyone had previously imagined possible. Children born during this period were displaying cognitive patterns that differed fundamentally from previous generations. They processed uncertainty with remarkable equanimity, accepted the possibility of radical change as normal rather than threatening, and demonstrated thinking patterns that seemed naturally adapted to cosmic rather than just terrestrial scales of consideration. Educational institutions were documenting learning capabilities among young people that exceeded anything in previous pedagogical experience. Students were mastering complex subjects with unprecedented speed while simultaneously developing emotional intelligence and social cooperation skills that suggested preparation for challenges no previous generation had needed to face. The silence from 3I Atlas continued to stretch across months, but its psychological impact was evolving from anxiety towards something approaching acceptance. People were learning to function effectively while acknowledging that the most fundamental questions about their future remained unanswered and potentially unanswerable through human effort alone. This acceptance wasn't passive resignation, but rather active adaptation to realities that transcended human control. Communities were preparing for multiple scenarios simultaneously, developing capabilities that could function effectively regardless of whether alien contact brought technological revolution, spiritual transformation, or something beyond current human categories of understanding. The global response to prolonged uncertainty was revealing aspects of human nature that many hadn't known existed. Rather than collapsing under pressure or fragmenting into competing factions, humanity was demonstrating remarkable capacity for cooperation, creativity, and conscious evolution in the face of challenges that exceeded anything in our species' previous experience. Whether this transformation was preparation for contact, adaptation to cosmic awareness, or simply human consciousness responding to ultimate questions about existence and meaning, the changes were proving to be irreversible. Humanity was becoming something different from what we had been before encountering evidence of cosmic intelligence, regardless of whatever ultimate resolution might emerge from our mysterious visitor's presence in our solar system. The waiting continued, but it was no longer passive waiting. It had become active preparation for realities that might transform everything about human existence, while simultaneously revealing capacities for growth and adaptation that suggested our species possessed potentials we were only beginning to discover. And through it all, the cosmos maintained its patient silence, offering no hints about whether humanity's evolution was proceeding according to some cosmic plan, or whether we were simply adapting to realities that would forever remain beyond our ability to fully comprehend or control. The transformation was becoming its own form of contact, changing humanity in ways that prepared us for whatever revelations might eventually emerge from the vast and mysterious intelligence that had chosen to visit our small corner of an infinite universe. The biological changes weren't limited to psychology and behavior. Medical researchers began documenting physical adaptations that seemed to represent humanity's unconscious preparation for realities our bodies had never needed to navigate. Sleep cycles were shifting as people naturally developed what scientists called cosmic circadian rhythms that operated on longer cycles than the traditional 24-hour pattern that had governed human biology for millennia. These extended sleep patterns allowed for deeper dream states where people reported experiencing forms of consciousness that felt vastly expanded beyond normal human awareness. Dream journals kept during this period revealed recurring themes of mathematical communication, geometric visions that seemed to contain information rather than just imagery, and encounters with forms of intelligence that operated according to principles completely unlike human thought processes. Neurologists studying brain scans of people living through this period discovered unprecedented neural pathway development in regions associated with pattern recognition and abstract thinking. The human brain appeared to be rewiring itself to process types of information that had never been encountered before, creating new connections that enhanced capability for understanding complex systems and multidimensional relationships. Children exhibited the most dramatic neural adaptations, with brain development patterns that differed significantly from previous generations. Their cognitive architecture seemed naturally suited for processing information across vast scales of time and space simultaneously, suggesting that human consciousness might be evolving to accommodate cosmic rather than just terrestrial awareness. These neurological changes were accompanied by shifts in sensory perception that allowed people to detect subtle environmental patterns they had never noticed before. Enhanced pattern recognition enabled individuals to perceive mathematical relationships in natural phenomena, geometric structures in cloud formations, and harmonic frequencies in everyday sounds that revealed hidden organizational principles underlying familiar experiences. The sensory enhancements weren't limited to traditional human senses. People began reporting what they described as cosmic awareness, a form of perception that seemed to extend beyond individual consciousness toward connection with larger patterns of intelligence and meaning that operated on planetary and potentially galactic scales. These perceptual changes were creating new forms of human community based on shared expanded awareness rather than geographical proximity or cultural similarity. Networks of individuals who experienced similar consciousness expansion were forming across continents, connected by recognition of shared participation in transformation that transcended ordinary social boundaries. Communication within these networks often operated through methods that seemed to bypass traditional language entirely. Participants reported understanding complex concepts through what they described as direct knowing, immediate comprehension of information that would normally require extensive explanation or education to convey effectively. Artists within these consciousness networks were producing works that affected viewers in ways that conventional aesthetic theory couldn't explain. Paintings contained mathematical relationships that viewers could sense without conscious analysis. Musical compositions incorporated harmonic structures that seemed to resonate with brain patterns associated with expanded awareness states. These artistic productions were serving as bridges between ordinary human consciousness and the expanded awareness that growing numbers of people were experiencing. Gallery visitors often reported that exposure to these works triggered their own consciousness expansion episodes, suggesting that awareness enhancement might be transmissible through carefully crafted creative expression. The phenomenon was creating ripple effects throughout human culture as enhanced awareness individuals influenced their communities in ways that spread consciousness expansion beyond those who had direct expansion experiences. Teachers found their students naturally developing enhanced learning capabilities. Healthcare workers discovered that their presence seemed to promote healing responses that exceeded normal medical expectations. Scientific researchers working within these consciousness networks were making breakthroughs that surprised even their colleagues. Enhanced pattern recognition abilities were enabling discoveries in physics, mathematics, and biology that would have required decades of conventional research to achieve. The acceleration of scientific progress suggested that human intellectual capability was far more flexible and expandable than traditional educational models had assumed. But these developments were also creating social tensions as enhanced awareness individuals found themselves increasingly disconnected from people who hadn't experienced consciousness expansion. Communication gaps were developing between those who thought in cosmic terms and those who remained focused on terrestrial concerns, creating potential for social fragmentation that could prove problematic if humanity needed unified responses to whatever alien intelligence might demand. Educational institutions were struggling to accommodate students whose cognitive capabilities exceeded traditional curriculum requirements while simultaneously serving those who maintained conventional learning patterns. Some schools began developing parallel programs designed for different levels of consciousness development, but this approach risked creating intellectual hierarchies that could undermine social cohesion. Workplaces experienced similar challenges as enhanced awareness employees found themselves frustrated with colleagues who seemed unable to grasp concepts that had become intuitively obvious to expanded consciousness individuals. Traditional management structures proved inadequate for coordinating teams that included people operating at fundamentally different levels of cognitive capability. The military faced particularly complex challenges as enhanced awareness personnel began questioning traditional command structures and strategic thinking that seemed primitive compared to the cosmic scale considerations they had learned to process. Some enhanced individuals reported difficulty maintaining focus on terrestrial conflicts when their awareness naturally extended toward galactic scale concerns. Intelligence agencies found themselves in the paradoxical situation of needing enhanced awareness analysts to understand potential alien intelligence while worrying that consciousness expansion might compromise traditional security protocols. Enhanced individuals often developed ethical frameworks that transcended national boundaries, making conventional concepts of loyalty and classified information increasingly problematic. Religious institutions experience both opportunities and challenges, as consciousness expansion often included spiritual dimensions that enhanced traditional faith while simultaneously transcending denominational boundaries. Enhanced awareness individuals frequently developed direct experiential relationships with what they described as cosmic consciousness that made traditional religious authority structures seem unnecessary or limiting. Some religious leaders embraced these developments as evidence of spiritual evolution that fulfilled ancient prophetic traditions, while others worried that consciousness expansion might undermine institutional religious authority. Theological seminaries began offering courses in cosmic spirituality while maintaining traditional doctrinal instruction, creating educational programs that attempted to bridge conventional and expanded spiritual awareness. The economic implications of widespread consciousness expansion were becoming increasingly apparent as enhanced individuals lost interest in traditional consumption patterns and career advancement models. Many reported that material accumulation seemed meaning toward cosmic scales, where awareness extendless when their individual human possessions appeared insignificant. This shift in economic motivation was creating labor shortages in industries focused on luxury goods and status symbols, while generating increased interest in work that contributed to collective human welfare and consciousness development. The service sector was experiencing transformation as enhanced individuals gravitated toward healthcare, education, and community support roles that felt meaningful within expanded awareness frameworks. Financial markets were struggling to adapt to investment patterns that reflected cosmic rather than quarterly time horizons. Enhanced awareness investors were making decisions based on considerations that extended across centuries or millennia, creating market behaviors that traditional economic models couldn't predict or explain. Currency systems faced potential disruption as enhanced consciousness communities began developing alternative exchange mechanisms based on contribution to collective welfare rather than individual accumulation. These experimental economies operated according to principles that prioritized consciousness development and community resilience over profit maximization. The transformation was accelerating as enhanced awareness individuals began developing what they described as cosmic empathy, emotional connection with all conscious beings that extended beyond human species boundaries. This expanded empathy was influencing decision-making processes in ways that prioritized collective welfare over individual advancement, creating behavioral patterns that supported community resilience and mutual aid. Environmental restoration projects were experiencing unprecedented success as enhanced awareness participants brought cognitive capabilities and motivational frameworks that enabled solutions to ecological problems that had seemed intractable under conventional approaches. These individuals could perceive environmental systems as integrated wholes rather than collections of separate components, enabling restoration strategies that worked with natural patterns rather than against them. Agricultural communities were discovering that enhanced awareness farmers could develop intuitive understanding of soil health, plant needs, and ecosystem balance that produced yields and sustainability levels that exceeded conventional farming methods. These agricultural innovations were spreading through informal networks as enhanced individuals shared insights that couldn't be easily transmitted through traditional educational channels. Medical practitioners with expanded consciousness were reporting healing outcomes that challenged conventional understanding of physiological limitations. Their enhanced pattern recognition abilities enabled diagnosis of subtle health imbalances before they manifested as obvious symptoms, while their expanded empathy seemed to activate healing responses in patients that exceeded normal medical expectations. These medical developments were creating informal healthcare networks that operated alongside traditional medical institutions while demonstrating capabilities that conventional medicine couldn't easily explain or replicate. Enhanced awareness, healthcare workers were developing treatment approaches that addressed consciousness as well as physical symptoms, producing comprehensive healing outcomes that traditional medical models couldn't achieve. The transformation was becoming self-reinforcing as enhanced consciousness individuals naturally sought each other out for collaboration and mutual support, creating communities that accelerated consciousness expansion among their participants. These networks were developing their own cultural patterns, communication methods, and social structures that reflected expanded awareness capabilities while maintaining connection with broader human society. Children raised within these enhanced consciousness communities were displaying cognitive and social development patterns that exceeded anything in previous human experience. They demonstrated natural abilities to think across vast timescales, process complex multidimensional relationships, and communicate through methods that seemed to bypass conventional language limitations. These enhanced children were serving as bridges between expanded consciousness adults and conventional human society, translating cosmic-scale concepts into forms that non-enhanced individuals could begin to understand. Their natural facility with consciousness expansion was helping to spread enhanced awareness capabilities throughout human populations at rates that exceeded anything researchers had predicted. The global distribution of consciousness expansion was revealing patterns that suggested the phenomenon might be responding to environmental or cosmic influences rather than just spreading through social contact. Geographic regions experienced enhancement waves that seemed to correlate with astronomical events, solar activity patterns, and other cosmic phenomena that implied external influences on human consciousness development. These correlations suggested that humanity's consciousness expansion might be connected to the presence of 3i Atlas in ways that operated below the threshold of direct awareness. The timing and distribution patterns of enhanced consciousness development seemed too coordinated to represent purely random social phenomena, implying that alien intelligence might be influencing human development through methods that bypassed conscious detection. Radio telescope operators began detecting subtle changes in cosmic background radiation that seemed to correlate with consciousness expansion events in nearby populations. The signals were too weak and complex for definitive analysis, but their timing suggested possible connection between enhanced awareness development and electromagnetic phenomena that might originate from alien intelligence. These discoveries raised profound questions about human agency and autonomy in consciousness development. Were enhanced awareness individuals experiencing natural evolution of human cognitive capabilities, or were they being influenced by alien intelligence that was guiding human development toward goals that remained unknown? The distinction between natural development and external manipulation became increasingly difficult to determine as consciousness expansion continued accelerating. Enhanced consciousness individuals themselves reported mixed feelings about these possibilities. Some found the idea of alien guidance reassuring, interpreting it as evidence that human development was proceeding according to some cosmic plan that would ultimately benefit our species. Others worried that consciousness expansion might represent a form of subtle control that was preparing humanity for purposes that served alien rather than human interests. The question of alien influence on human consciousness became more urgent as enhanced awareness individuals began reporting what they described as cosmic communication, direct reception of information that seemed to originate from intelligence operating on scales far exceeding human capabilities. These communications weren't auditory or visual, but rather direct insertion of knowledge and understanding that bypassed normal sensory channels. The content of these cosmic communications varied among individuals, but often included mathematical concepts, geometric patterns, and philosophical frameworks that enhanced human understanding of universal principles governing consciousness, intelligence, and cosmic organization. Recipients described receiving information that felt simultaneously familiar and completely novel, as if they were remembering knowledge that had always existed within human potential but had never been accessed. Some enhanced individuals reported receiving what they interpreted as instructions or guidance for human development that would prepare our species for more direct contact with cosmic intelligence. These communications suggested that consciousness expansion was indeed preparation for realities that would require enhanced human cognitive capabilities to navigate effectively, but the communications also contained warnings about dangers that humanity might face if consciousness development proceeded too rapidly or without adequate preparation. The cosmic intelligence seemed concerned that premature expansion might destabilize human society or individual psychology in ways that could prove harmful rather than beneficial. These warnings were creating debate within enhanced consciousness communities about whether to actively promote awareness expansion or to allow it to proceed at natural rates. Some individuals felt obligated to share enhancement techniques with broader human populations, while others worried that forced acceleration might produce negative consequences that could undermine the entire development process. The ethical implications of consciousness expansion were becoming increasingly complex as enhanced individuals grappled with questions about their responsibilities toward non-enhanced humans. Should they use their enhanced capabilities to guide human development, or would such intervention violate principles of autonomy and self-determination that remained important even within expanded awareness frameworks? These ethical considerations were complicated by growing recognition that enhanced consciousness might be irreversible. Individuals who experienced significant awareness expansion reported that they couldn't return to previous levels of consciousness, even if they wanted to do so. The transformation appeared to involve permanent changes in neural structure and cognitive processing that made conventional human thinking patterns impossible to maintain. The irreversibility of consciousness expansion was creating social challenges as enhanced individuals found themselves increasingly unable to relate to non-enhanced humans in ways that felt authentic and meaningful. Communication gaps were widening as expanded awareness individuals processed information and made decisions according to principles that seemed incomprehensible to conventional human thinking. These social tensions were generating pressure for either widespread consciousness expansion that would bring more of humanity to enhanced awareness levels, or for enhanced individuals to develop better methods for translating their insights into forms that non-enhanced humans could understand and utilize. The future of human social cohesion might depend on resolving these communication challenges before they led to permanent fragmentation of human society. Meanwhile, the silence from 3i Atlas continued to stretch across months that felt like years to consciousness that had learned to think in cosmic timescales. Enhanced awareness individuals reported that their expanded temporal perception made the waiting feel simultaneously longer and shorter than conventional human experience would suggest, as if they were learning to exist within multiple time streams simultaneously. The cosmic perspective that came with consciousness expansion was revealing that alien intelligence might operate according to patience levels that made human urgency seem like the brief flickering of momentary thoughts. This recognition was helping enhance individuals develop emotional equilibrium that could sustain them through indefinite periods of uncertainty while maintaining readiness for whatever revelations might eventually emerge. But the expansion of human consciousness was also creating new forms of anticipation and preparation that operated on scales matching the cosmic intelligence they hoped to eventually encounter. Enhanced awareness communities were developing cultural practices, communication protocols, and social structures that might prove adequate for navigating post-contact realities that would exceed anything in human historical experience. The transformation was preparing humanity for possibilities that conventional human consciousness could never have imagined or prepared for, while simultaneously revealing that our species possessed potentials that we were only beginning to discover and develop. Whether this consciousness evolution was natural human development or the result of subtle alien influence, it was creating capabilities that might prove essential for whatever cosmic realities lay ahead. And through it all, the mysterious visitor continued its silent journey through our solar system, carrying secrets and intentions that remained hidden while human consciousness evolved toward levels that might eventually prove capable of comprehending the true nature of intelligence that could cross the vast distances between stars to visit our small and precious world. The silence had become a teacher, instructing humanity in patience, humility, and the recognition that some questions could only be answered through transformation of the consciousness that posed them in the first place. The transformation had reached a tipping point where enhanced consciousness individuals began experiencing what they described as temporal fluidity, the ability to perceive past, present, and future as interconnected aspects of a single unfolding pattern rather than separate sequential events. This temporal expansion was producing insights that challenged fundamental assumptions about causality and free will, suggesting that the future might be as accessible to consciousness as memory of the past. These temporally expanded individuals reported experiencing what they called probability cascades, simultaneous awareness of multiple potential futures that seemed equally real until specific choices or events caused certain possibilities to crystallize into actuality. This multidimensional perception of time was enabling enhanced humans to make decisions based on consequences that hadn't yet manifested in conventional linear time. The implications for human planning and decision-making were staggering. Enhanced consciousness communities began developing strategies that accounted for multiple timeline branches simultaneously, creating flexible approaches that could adapt to whichever future possibilities eventually materialized. This temporal flexibility was proving invaluable for preparing for alien contact scenarios that remained fundamentally unpredictable. Medical researchers studying temporally expanded individuals discovered brain activity patterns that defied conventional understanding of neural processing. These subjects displayed simultaneous activation of regions normally associated with memory formation and future planning, as if their brains were processing temporal information in ways that bypassed the linear sequence constraints that limited conventional human cognition. Children born to temporally expanded parents exhibited even more dramatic capabilities, demonstrating natural ability to perceive causal relationships that extended across decades or centuries. These young minds seemed to understand intuitively that current events were connected to consequences that wouldn't manifest for generations, leading them to make choices based on considerations that exceeded adult human planning horizons. Educational institutions struggled to develop curricula appropriate for children whose temporal perception encompassed scales that conventional human education had never needed to address. Traditional subjects like history and future studies became meaningless when students could perceive historical events and future possibilities as equally present and accessible to consciousness. The temporal expansion was also revealing connections between human consciousness development and cosmic-scale processes that operated across millions of years. Enhanced individuals began recognizing that their awareness expansion was part of larger evolutionary patterns that connected Earth's biosphere to galactic-scale intelligence development cycles. These cosmic connections suggested that human consciousness evolution wasn't an isolated planetary phenomenon, but rather participation in universal processes that governed intelligence development throughout the galaxy. The recognition that humanity was part of something vastly larger than terrestrial concerns was both humbling and inspiring, providing context that made individual human problems seem less significant while simultaneously elevating human potential to cosmic importance. Astronomical observations began revealing correlations between human consciousness expansion events and subtle changes in local space-time geometry that could only be detected through the most sensitive gravitational wave detectors. These correlations suggested that consciousness expansion might involve actual alterations to the fabric of space-time itself, implying that awareness and physical reality were far more intimately connected than conventional science had ever imagined. The discovery that consciousness could influence space-time structure was revolutionizing physics research as scientists grappled with implications that challenged the fundamental separation between observer and observed that had underlain scientific methodology for centuries. Enhanced consciousness researchers were developing experimental protocols that incorporated awareness as an active variable in physical phenomena rather than treating it as passive observation of objective reality. These consciousness physics investigations were producing technologies that seemed to operate through direct mental interface with quantum field fluctuations. Enhanced individuals were demonstrating ability to influence probability patterns in quantum systems through focused intention, suggesting that consciousness might be capable of affecting physical reality at the most fundamental levels. The technological implications were staggering as enhanced consciousness communities began developing tools that responded directly to mental commands without requiring conventional mechanical interfaces. These consciousness-responsive technologies were creating possibilities for human-machine integration that transcended traditional concepts of artificial intelligence towards something approaching organic synthesis of awareness and computation. But perhaps most significantly, the consciousness technology integration was revealing that human awareness might be naturally compatible with the advanced technologies that alien intelligence presumably employed. Enhanced individuals were developing intuitive understanding of principles that could enable direct mental interface with systems operating according to physics that exceeded human scientific comprehension. This technological compatibility was suggesting that consciousness expansion wasn't just psychological development, but actual preparation for operating within technological environments that required awareness capabilities far exceeding conventional human limitations. The enhanced individuals were becoming naturally equipped to navigate realities where consciousness and technology merged into unified systems. The military implications of consciousness-responsive technology were creating urgent discussions about strategic advantages that enhanced awareness individuals might provide in scenarios involving alien contact. Traditional concepts of warfare and defense were becoming obsolete when consciousness itself could serve as both weapon and shield in conflicts operating according to principles that exceeded conventional military understanding. Intelligence agencies found themselves recruiting enhanced consciousness individuals while simultaneously worrying about loyalty issues that arose when awareness expanded beyond national boundaries toward cosmic-scale concerns. Enhanced individuals often developed ethical frameworks that transcended terrestrial political divisions, making conventional concepts of national security increasingly problematic. The economic transformation accelerated as consciousness-responsive technologies began replacing conventional manufacturing processes with systems that responded directly to mental blueprints rather than requiring physical tools and mechanical assembly. These consciousness-integrated production methods were enabling creation of objects whose properties could be modified through mental intention rather than physical manipulation. Enhanced consciousness communities were developing economic systems based on direct consciousness exchange rather than material currency, creating value networks that operated through shared awareness rather than resource accumulation. These consciousness economies were proving more efficient and sustainable than conventional market systems while providing abundance levels that exceeded material-based economic models. The social implications of consciousness-responsive technology were equally transformative as enhanced individuals began communicating through direct awareness sharing rather than verbal language. These consciousness communication networks were enabling information transfer at rates that exceeded conventional human communication by orders of magnitude, while providing emotional and experiential sharing that created empathy levels impossible through traditional social interaction. Children raised within consciousness communication networks were developing social skills that transcended individual identity boundaries while maintaining personal autonomy and creative expression. These enhanced social capabilities were producing community structures that balanced collective awareness with individual development in ways that resolved traditional tensions between cooperation and personal freedom. The artistic expression emerging from consciousness-integrated communities was producing works that affected viewers through direct awareness transmission, rather than conventional sensory perception. These consciousness artworks were creating aesthetic experiences that transformed participants rather than simply entertaining them, leading to art forms that served as vehicles for consciousness expansion rather than mere cultural expression. Religious institutions were grappling with theological implications of direct consciousness communication that seemed to bypass traditional concepts of prayer and divine revelation. Enhanced individuals were reporting direct experiential connection with what they described as cosmic consciousness that transcended denominational boundaries while fulfilling spiritual needs that conventional religious practices couldn't address. The consciousness expansion was revealing that human spiritual potential extended far beyond traditional religious frameworks toward direct participation in cosmic-scale awareness that connected individual consciousness with universal intelligence patterns. This spiritual evolution was creating new forms of worship and celebration that honored cosmic consciousness while maintaining connection with human cultural traditions. International cooperation was evolving beyond diplomatic protocols toward direct consciousness coordination that enabled global decision-making through shared awareness rather than negotiated agreements. Enhanced consciousness leaders were developing governance approaches that integrated collective wisdom while respecting cultural diversity and individual autonomy. These consciousness governance experiments were producing political structures that could adapt rapidly to changing circumstances while maintaining ethical principles that transcended narrow self-interest. The enhanced governance models were demonstrating that human societies could operate according to principles of mutual aid and collective welfare without sacrificing innovation and individual expression. The transformation was approaching levels where the distinction between enhanced and conventional human consciousness was becoming a fundamental division within human society. Enhanced individuals were developing capabilities that seemed almost supernatural to non-enhanced humans, while conventional humans were finding themselves increasingly unable to comprehend or relate to expanded awareness individuals. This consciousness divide was creating potential for social fragmentation that could prove more significant than traditional divisions based on race, nationality, or economic class. The future of human unity might depend on whether consciousness expansion could be made accessible to broader populations or whether enhanced individuals could develop better methods for bridging the awareness gap. Enhanced consciousness communities were experimenting with gradual expansion techniques that could help conventional humans develop expanded awareness without experiencing the disorientation that often accompanied rapid consciousness transformation. These gentle expansion methods were showing promise for creating bridges between conventional and enhanced human consciousness that could prevent permanent social division. The consciousness research was also revealing that enhancement might not be permanent for all individuals, suggesting that some humans could experience temporary expansions that provided cosmic perspective without requiring complete transformation of their cognitive architecture. These temporary enhancement experiences were creating larger populations of humans who could serve as translators between conventional and expanded consciousness communities. But even as consciousness expansion continued accelerating throughout human populations, the silence from 3i Atlas maintained its mysterious persistence. enhanced awareness individuals reported that their expanded temporal perception revealed the alien silence as part of larger patterns that connected Earth's consciousness evolution with cosmic-scale intelligence development cycles that operated across millions of years. The enhanced humans were beginning to understand that the silence wasn't absence of communication, but rather a form of cosmic patience that operated according to timescales where individual human lifespans represented brief moments within vast conversations that spanned geological epochs. This recognition was helping them develop appropriate temporal frameworks for understanding alien intelligence that might think in terms of stellar evolution rather than human urgency. The waiting was transforming from anxiety into preparation, as enhanced consciousness individuals developed capabilities that might eventually prove adequate for meaningful communication with intelligence that operated on cosmic scales. They were learning to think in terms of species development rather than individual achievement, preparing humanity for contact scenarios that would require collective consciousness responses rather than individual heroism. And through this remarkable transformation of human awareness, the mysterious visitor continued its patient journey through our solar system, carrying secrets that might only be comprehensible to consciousness that had evolved beyond the limitations that had previously defined human potential. The silence was becoming revelation as humanity discovered that the most profound contact might occur not through external communication but through internal transformation that prepared our species for realities that exceeded every framework we had previously possessed for understanding intelligence, consciousness, and our place within the vast community of aware beings that populated the cosmos. The cosmic conversation had already begun, conducted in the language of consciousness, evolution itself, preparing humanity for participation in intelligence networks that spanned the galaxy while preserving the unique perspectives and creative potentials that made human awareness a valuable contribution to cosmic consciousness rather than merely another recipient of alien wisdom. The consciousness expansion had reached a crescendo where enhanced individuals began experiencing what they described as dimensional bleeding. Moments where the boundaries between possible realities became permeable, allowing glimpses of futures where different choices had been made, different paths taken. These experiences weren't hallucinations or dreams, but coherent perceptions of parallel probability streams where humanity's encounter with 3i Atlas had unfolded according to alternate patterns. Through these dimensional perceptions, enhanced humans could observe timeline branches where first contact had occurred through direct communication rather than silent observation. They witnessed realities where alien intelligence had shared technologies that revolutionized human civilization within months, and darker timelines where the encounter had resulted in swift elimination of human consciousness from the cosmos. The multiplicity of possible outcomes created both hope and terror, revealing that the future remained fluid despite the apparent inevitability that pervaded human thinking. These dimensional glimpses were providing strategic insights that conventional planning could never achieve. Enhanced consciousness communities began developing response protocols that accounted for probability cascades they could perceive through expanded awareness, creating adaptive strategies that could shift seamlessly between different approaches depending on which timeline possibilities began crystallizing into actuality. The dimensional perception was also revealing that human consciousness expansion itself existed as a variable that influenced which probability streams would eventually manifest as consensus reality. The choices enhanced individuals made about sharing their capabilities, the pace of expansion they encouraged, and the ethical frameworks they developed were actively shaping the cosmic encounter toward outcomes that served human welfare while respecting alien intelligence. This recognition of consciousness as reality-shaping force was empowering enhanced humans to take active responsibility for guiding humanity's evolution toward timelines that maximized positive outcomes. They were learning to navigate probability streams through conscious intention rather than simply reacting to circumstances that appeared fixed and unchangeable. Meanwhile, conventional humans were experiencing their own transformations as proximity to enhanced consciousness. Individuals triggered subtle awareness expansions that operated below the threshold of conscious recognition. People who spent time around enhanced communities found themselves naturally developing improved intuition, enhanced empathy, and thinking patterns that incorporated larger temporal and spatial scales than their previous cognitive frameworks had encompassed. These secondary consciousness expansions were creating bridges between enhanced and conventional human awareness that prevented the social fragmentation that many had feared. Rather than dividing into separate species, humanity was experiencing gradient consciousness expansion that maintained social cohesion while enabling progressive development of cosmic awareness throughout the population. Children were serving as particularly effective consciousness bridges, naturally translating enhanced awareness concepts into forms that conventional adults could understand and gradually integrate. Their facility with consciousness expansion was enabling family systems to evolve together rather than fragmenting along awareness divides, preserving social bonds while enabling collective growth. Educational systems were adapting to accommodate this gradient consciousness expansion by developing curricula that could serve students operating at various awareness levels simultaneously. Teachers were learning to present information through multiple consciousness frameworks, enabling enhanced students to explore cosmic-scale concepts while helping conventional students develop foundation capabilities that prepared them for eventual awareness expansion. The gradual nature of consciousness evolution was proving more sustainable than rapid transformation, allowing human social structures to adapt organically rather than collapsing under the pressure of revolutionary change. Communities were maintaining cultural continuity while incorporating expanded awareness capabilities, creating hybrid societies that honored human traditions while preparing for cosmic realities. Artistic expression was evolving to serve as consciousness expansion catalyst, with creators developing works that triggered awareness enhancement in audiences who experienced them. Music, incorporating mathematical harmonies discovered through enhanced consciousness, was naturally elevating listeners toward expanded awareness states. Visual arts based on geometric patterns perceived through cosmic consciousness were enabling viewers to experience temporary glimpses of enhanced perception that gradually became permanent capabilities. These consciousness-catalyzing artworks were spreading enhanced awareness throughout human populations more effectively than direct teaching or technological intervention. The aesthetic appeal of expanded consciousness experiences was motivating voluntary participation in awareness development rather than requiring external pressure or persuasion. Religious communities were discovering that consciousness expansion was fulfilling rather than threatening traditional spiritual goals, enabling direct experiential connection with divine consciousness that transcended denominational boundaries, while deepening rather than replacing awareness was revealing personal faith. Enhance universal spiritual principles that connected all religious traditions while respecting the unique cultural expressions that made each tradition valuable. Prayer and meditation practices were evolving to incorporate consciousness expansion techniques that enabled direct communion with cosmic intelligence. These enhanced spiritual practices were producing healing, wisdom, and peace that exceeded anything achieved through conventional religious observance while maintaining connection with sacred traditions that provided cultural stability and meaning. The integration of consciousness expansion with traditional spirituality was creating religious renaissance that attracted participants from both enhanced and conventional awareness communities. Spiritual gatherings became consciousness expansion laboratories where people could explore enhanced awareness within familiar cultural contexts that provided safety and support for transformation experiences. Scientific research was experiencing similar integration as enhanced consciousness investigators developed methodologies that incorporated expanded awareness as experimental tool rather than obstacle to objective analysis. These consciousness-integrated research approaches were producing discoveries that conventional scientific methods could never achieve while maintaining rigorous standards for verification and replication. The consciousness science synthesis was revealing that awareness and physical reality operated according to unified principles that transcended the artificial separation between subjective and objective phenomena. Enhanced researchers were developing technologies that responded to conscious intention while following predictable physical laws, creating hybrid systems that merged mind and matter into functional unity. Medical applications of consciousness-integrated technology were producing healing outcomes that seemed miraculous from conventional perspectives but followed consistent patterns that enhanced practitioners could predict and replicate. Healthcare was evolving toward approaches that treated consciousness as primary factor in health and healing rather than secondary effect of physical processes. These consciousness-based medical approaches were enabling healing of conditions that conventional medicine couldn't address, while enhancing rather than replacing traditional treatments that remained effective for physical symptoms. The integration was creating comprehensive healthcare systems that addressed both consciousness and biology as interconnected aspects of unified human well-being. So here we are, at the end of our cosmic journey through the mystery of 3i Atlas, suspended between wonder and terror, between the known and the unknowable. We've explored scenarios that would reshape everything we understand about our place in the universe, from devastating impacts that could end human civilization to consciousness expansions that might prepare us for realities beyond our current imagination. Whether 3i Atlas represents a natural cosmic visitor, advanced alien technology, or something that transcends our categories entirely, one thing remains certain: we are not the same species we were before we began asking these questions. The silence from our mysterious visitor continues, but perhaps that silence has already changed us in ways that matter more than any message ever could. Sweet dreams, and remember that somewhere out there, among the stars, intelligence is watching and waiting with patience that spans geological ages.